Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie Brown Cordero, and I am a transformer with the Transform Lifestyle Medicine Alliance. And this is my presentation on Get to What Matters, Tools to Transform Conversations at Work. All right, so this is the book that I used. This is Get to What Matters by Wendy D. Lynch and Clydette DeGroot. So this is a book that helps to give readers healthy tools to forming long-lasting relationships through meaningful and powerful conversations. So this book has really helped me not only communicate with my family members and my peers, but just kind of better communicate with myself too. So let's get started. On the slide, you're going to see the two authors, Wendy D. Lynch. She is a research scientist and statistician in various fields, and she's known for consulting with startups and Fortune 500 companies to help her clients succeed. And then in the next picture to the right, we have Clydette DeGroot. She's a psychologist and a clinical professor in family medicine and is also a consultant. She helps support nonprofit and public corporations in the United States and Europe through the DeGroot Foundation. So you could actually look her up on Google and you're going to see that she runs the foundation with her husband. So this is the agenda for the overall presentation. First, we're going to talk about the importance and power of conversations. And then we're going to talk about listening and its importance and what that entails and everything. And then we're going to talk about the power of questions, how to ask a question, why we ask questions, why are they meaningful. And then we're going to discuss the Get to What Matters toolbox. Which is a section in the book that I just showed you that has a variety of tips and tools and navigating through different types of conversations and situations. And then before we get started, we're just gonna do a little disclaimer. So the information presented in this PowerPoint and in the book, it's only meant to serve as a guide in helping you facilitate healthy conversations. But it's important to note that there could be different alternatives or strategies that can work for you. So not every tip and tool is going to be useful for you, and it might be useful for someone else. So to get started, we have two quotes here. So one of them is by the authors of the book, and it says, "A single conversation can launch a career, spark an idea, resolve conflict, or forge a lifelong relationship." And then the next quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says that the best of life is conversation. So two very important things to keep in mind when we're diving into any conversation that we're having with anyone. So now we're going to talk about what are conversations. So conversations are known as a talk between two or more people, and it's when both parties kind of exchange new ideas or information. And having conversational skills is very important when it comes to socialization. And these conversations can go a long way in establishing new bonds and friendships with people. And lastly, it's important to note that conversations offer an opportunity for both parties to learn and to get to the heart of what really matters within the conversation. So next, we're going to talk about why do we have conversations? So we have three different types of purposes for conversations. We have transactional, learning, and discovery. So transactional conversations, their purpose is to warrant quick responses to give and receive information. And people can have conversations for learning purposes as well. And these conversations involve sharing new pieces of information and gaining a deeper understanding of a certain topic. And lastly, people can have conversations for the purpose of discovery. So with these conversations, new solutions or breakthroughs are generated. So creation of new ideas and options and opinions, some really helpful tips into getting to what matters in a conversation. And next, we have setting an intention. This is a very important step in a conversation, and it's important to note that to set an intention in the beginning of a conversation means to be aware of the purpose and implications of the conversation. So there are different types of intentions, and before setting an intention, it's important to ask yourself these questions. You should ask yourself, what energy will you bring to the conversation? You should ask yourself, what presuppositions will you leave behind? And you should also ask yourself, what is the hope for the other person in the conversation? And here's a list of some types of intentions that you can have when going into a conversation. So being open to someone's ideas, to gain a sense of clarity, to prove you are right in something, to change or alter someone's mindset, and to invite the other person to communicate their hopes and concerns. So next, this is a very important part of the book. They really talk about the 3 Ps, which is prompt, pause, prompt, and paraphrase. So pause first, prompt for more, and paraphrase what you learned. So when engaging in a conversation, it's important to keep these 3 things in mind. The 3 Ps, pause, prompt, and paraphrase, will help when you are getting to know someone new, and it's going to help you make sure you understand everything within the conversation so that no details are left out. And it's going to help you make sure that you understood the other person's objectives within the conversation. So these 3 tools are very important in any conversation, any type of conversation. So next, pause. So pausing in the conversation is helpful. It can help you slow down and make room for thinking in a conversation. It gives everyone a chance to kind of consider what has been said, and it minimizes the chances of you jumping in too soon. I know when I'm in a conversation, I kind of think I know the answer and I jump in and I kind of answer it for the other person, but no, you should really pause and take a deep breath before you input more information. With that being said, let's actually talk about how you can pause in a conversation. So you can pause by taking a deep breath before speaking, like I just said, making intentional eye contact. So literally just staring at the person for 3 seconds and then hopefully they'll say something in return, or physically taking a step back in a conversation. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about more about prompting. So this tactic is an invitation for the other person to say more, and it helps put everyone in the conversation on the same page and label another person's emotion first. So it helps label another person's emotion. And this last component is the component of the rule of 3, which essentially means to prompt 3 times in a conversation. So the authors kind of describe that there's a rule of 3. So you're going to prompt 3 times in a conversation. So say I'm conversating with my friend and they're not really telling me what's going on, like why they're upset or something. So I would be like, what's going on? They're going to be like, oh, nothing much. And I'm going to be like, you say nothing much, but what does that really mean? What's really going on? Oh, well, I think something happened with my parents, you know. And I'm gonna say, oh, okay, something happened with your parents. So is that really what's going on? What about your parents made you upset? And they're gonna be like, oh, well, I actually got in a fight about my grades. So that's an example of prompting 3 times. So the idea is that someone will not get to the heart of what matters with the first prompt. So that's why you prompt 3 times in order for them to basically spill the beans. And there are several types of prompts that you can use in the conversation. There are nonverbal encouragers, basically just nodding, or one-word encouragers, wow, really? Or short empathetic statements and requests to continue. And this is a little quote that I provided too. And it says that prompt with statements that acknowledge the emotion first before prompting about the topic itself. So if I were talking to my friend in the scenario that I just came up with, I would say something like, wow, that must have been really frustrating for you. And that right there would serve as a prompt. So next, we're going to talk about paraphrasing. And this is the last component of the 3 Ps. It involves reflecting back on the most important points and helping others know that you understood everything that was said. And it also helps the other person identify things that they may have missed and can be helpful when the conversation is getting too repetitive. So when you're kind of in just a circular, oh, so that's what you meant, or you're trying to kind of finalize details and everyone's kind of just asking the same questions, this type of tool, paraphrasing, is super helpful with that. And lastly, Paraphrasing can help launch the conversation into future topics. So it can help bring about a new scene in the conversation. Next, noticing your tendencies in a conversation. So this next slide is important, and it talks about noticing your tendencies. And these tendencies are basically patterns that occur when one is not present in a conversation. It's important to note that attention can be diverted based on someone's choice of words, tone of voice, and even their body language. Giving someone the wrong stare can automatically trigger a tendency. And you must also understand that conversations are twofold. So it's not just one person conversating with the other, it's two people having a dialogue together. And there are different techniques that one can have in a conversation, different tendency techniques rather. So someone can hijack a conversation, they can problem solve without really knowing the full story, or dropping a conversation when they're unsure of what to say. So if someone's really shy and there's a group of people talking and they're talking about something that you're not really knowledgeable about, like football. I'm not knowledgeable about football. So if someone asked me, "Oh, did you see the game last night?" And I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, but I was doing my homework instead. Let's talk about my homework instead." So that'd be an example of dropping the conversation, or kidnapping a conversation and making it all about you, which is, kind of what I just exampled right there too. So next we have noticing a person in a conversation. And people, when you're noticing a person in a conversation, you're going to notice that they come in three forms in what they bring to a conversation. So what we see the other person is doing, like their visible appearance, like if they showed up to a professional meeting, kind of just wearing whatever, wearing sweats, not really giving any sort of meaning to the conversation. What we hear from the person, their tone of voice, their word choice, if they just kind of sound really bored and agitated throughout the entirety of the conversation, and what we sense within a conversation. And the authors kind of noted this as our sixth sense. So it's when you can automatically internally indicate that there's a problem either in the conversation or with someone in the conversation. So say I'm with a group of friends and I have a gut feeling that something's not right, that my friend's not telling me something that I should know. Next, we are going to talk about listening for what matters, which is very important when you're partaking in any conversation. And we can do this by utilizing these general tips that I've highlighted in the bullet points right here. It's important to acknowledge emotions instead of contradicting them. It's important to acknowledge someone's behavior, like if they're really anxious and they're doing like a nervous, anxious tick, like I don't know, like playing with their rings or something. Understand that it's not personal when they're doing that. And it's also important to get to the backstory. And this backstory is something that the authors really hone in on. And getting to the backstory entails helping someone understand the purpose of the conversation and why it's important to them, not to you, but to them. And you're probably asking, what is a backstory? I didn't really know that when I was first reading the book. A backstory is the heart of what matters in a conversation. And it can really help explain why we react a certain way when another person is talking to us. It can explain why we get offended so easily when someone is talking to us. And it could also help explain our tendencies, which I highlighted before, which were hijacking, dropping, or kidnapping. Lastly, getting to the backstory can lead to genuine and positive connection with those involved. And I provided a little quote here also from the text. It says, fleshing out the backstory is a prerequisite for moving forward. And the first thing someone says is likely not what really matters, which is why you have to prompt 3 times in order to get to the backstory, to what really matters to them and not to you. So next, we have listening for direction and different levels of what matters. So listening for direction entails noticing what someone is focusing on in a conversation. So when they focus on the past, it entails that they may be implementing excuses for behaviors or barriers within the conversation. Um, when someone's focusing on the present, it can indicate that they have a realistic and timely conversations. And when you're focusing on the future, this consists of talking about new possibilities and a shift towards positive energy. And when listening for levels of what matters, it can bring about a different understanding of different perspectives in the conversation. So you can open your eyes and open your mind to something that you weren't really thinking about before the conversation even happened. So, a good example about this could be when listening for motivation. It includes a person's identity, their values, their beliefs, and how that person interprets the world. And when you're listening for strategy, this could entail someone discussing the types of choices and behaviors that they make as a result of the conversation, or sorry, as a result of their motivations. Um, so when you're talking about strategy, like if I was talking to my friend about how he would navigate his situation with his parents, um, he would kind of give me some strategies that he would work towards. Like, first, I'm going to talk to my parents, and then maybe I'm going to reflect myself in my own personal journal and kind of see where I was in the wrong and where they were in the wrong, and see if we could come to an understanding. So that's kind of strategizing right there. So that's something that you would want to highlight in your head so that you can piggyback and prompt further to helping them get to their solution. And lastly, listening for specifics in a conversation. This includes getting into detail about a certain project, and it's an opportunity for everyone in the conversation to gain more clarity. So next, we have implementing questions within a conversation. And questions are really important. And we ask questions for a variety of ways. We ask variety of reasons. We ask questions because we care about what the other person is saying. We ask questions because we are genuinely interested in someone's answer and their motivation behind their answer. We also can ask questions because we think we already know the answer. Or we can ask questions because we want to know more about a particular subject. So with that being said, there are 3 types of questions. There are transactional questions, and an example of this could be, do you like the outfit I'm wearing today? So it's a simple yes or no question. An example of a learning question would be, what were you planning to buy at the supermarket? So you're trying to learn what kinds of foods they like when they're navigating through the aisles. And a question to think twice about, a contradictory question, would be if you're in a family setting and your mom's like, your brother is a medical student and he's successful. What are you doing with your life? So you see how that could kind of have double connotations there. So next, we're going to talk about the difference between transaction questions versus learning questions. So transactional questions, they're closed-ended. Like I said, they're yes or no questions. You ask them to gain information, and these answers seek an agreement. So basically yes or no. And then you have learning questions, which are a little more open-ended, and it's based off impression of the other person. It's an opportunity for the other person to share their experience or for you to share an experience. And it can also be an opportunity for the other person to showcase their expertise. If they're really knowledgeable about a topic and you ask them, how did working on this project make you feel? And then they would go off on a rant about how they've been studying this particular disease for literally 10 years and how they're so excited about it. And they get down to the specifics of why they got into studying that disease. And you can really get to know more about that other person. So next we have questions to think twice about. These are the contradictory ones. So first we have criticism disguised in a question. This is when the purpose of our question is to deliver judgment or criticism. So that example about the medical school, like your brother just got accepted into medical school. What are you doing with your life? Like that's super super hypocritical. This can also be known as emotional manipulation, as your intention is to be negative and put the other person down. The next are solving questions. These are opinions delivered in the form of questions. You ask these when you think you know the answer already. And then the next are why questions. These are asked to better understand situations. Using this type of question to ask about a behavior can induce a negative and defensive response, like, why are you drinking wine instead of a bottle of water? That's a why question. Lastly, we have how questions, and they are asked when you are trying to understand someone's reasoning behind their behavior. So it assumes the other person had an appropriate or conscious reasoning behind their behavior. So I guess an example would be, how are you functioning so perfectly right now when you had a really rough day yesterday? So next we are going to talk about tips for posing questions. So these are some general tips for posing questions. First, it's important to pose when it's time. So after you have used the 3 Ps, pause, paraphrase, prompt, or when you find the opportunity to encourage a positive future focus and generate fresh thinking. Next, it's important to frame the question when the answer may be too difficult for the other person to answer. This can be done by giving the person a heads up when asking difficult questions or when you're changing gears in a conversation. Also, it can be used, you can do this by using non-threatening phrases to engage the other person in answering. So an example of this could be, before we move on, I just wanted to know how you felt about how the group presentation went last night. So you're kind of framing the topic before you're kind of framing the question, the difficult to answer question, because maybe the group presentation didn't go well for the other person and they're not really comfortable in just automatically expressing why. And the last tip is to choose your words carefully. So this entails getting to the full story before asking the question instinctively. It may be helpful to help the other paraphrase multiple times to make sure you have encaptured everything important. So this is an important way to use the rule of 3, or even the paraphrasing technique where you're really stuck in a conversation, you don't know where to move forward. So you would take a step back, you paraphrase, basically summarizing what the other person has said in the conversation, and then hopefully from there you can be able to move forward. So next we have discovery, launch, and momentum questions. So discovery questions are questions that help in future focused thinking, and they bring about a new positive light within a conversation. It could also help inspire new solutions and help expand ideas when you're stuck on the same topic. Then we have launch questions. These can help with getting you back on course with a conversation, and it can help break loose from a stuck point as well. Some examples of launch questions are, where would you like to go from here? Or what would you like to have happened? Lastly, we have, sorry, my AirPods. Lastly, we have momentum questions, and these help instill confidence within a situation, and they can be used to increase another's self-efficacy, so their confidence. If an event is too worrisome for them, and an example of this can be, when this project worked well in the past, what did you do to make it happen? So just think about that there, how that would work. And then we have offering something meaningful in a conversation. So whenever you're conversating with someone, you always have to think about what you're going to offer to them. You always want to add value to the other person when you're conversating with them. So this consists of offering several ideas in which the other person is free to accept or reject without judgment. It's important to paraphrase or prompt at least twice here to help better understand what the other person wants and what matters to them. And remember that giving advice and sharing your expertise does not count as an offer. You're kind of just selling yourself there and being a know-it-all if you do that. You have to first offer to share your experience or advice and ask if that would actually be beneficial to the other person. So don't automatically be like, oh, I know how to help you. Here's how we do it. No, it's important to first ask. Say something like, is it okay if I give you some advice right now based on my own experience? Some questions to ask yourself before inserting advice are, will it be helpful to the other person in making their decision? Um, or could it help shift the conversation into a more positive perspective? Or another question to ask yourself is, would my advice actually be helpful to you? Or am I just, like I was saying earlier, trying to share my expertise? Or do I want to just make an impression with what I'm offering, with the type of advice that I'm offering? You can also ask yourself if it will be helpful for the other person, like if the if the advice that you're giving will actually be helpful for the other person to make their decision. If not, then it's probably best not to share it. So next, we have the Get to What Matters toolbox, and this is the big section in the end of the book that basically gives you tips, tools, and strategies on how to navigate different conversations and different types and different settings of conversations. And oh no, what happened? Sorry about that. My computer glitched. So this is the handout that you all should have gotten, or it's within the website portion of the presentation. And it's supposed to be an interactive portion. So the idea is you're going to have this handout while the presentation is going on. The rest of the presentation, you can kind of fill out for yourself the different types of strategies. So we have the first section, beginning a conversation. So when you're beginning a conversation, it's important to make it comfortable for all those who are involved. It's important to be present in the conversation, and it's important to build rapport. So building rapport, you can do that in a variety of ways. You can do it by nodding your head, by giving a greeting, a simple handshake, saying, hey, hello, how are you? Or even through a Zoom call, you can build rapport. You can say, oh, hey, Rachel, how are you doing today? Or, hi, my name is Lizzie. What is your name? Another important tip is to have authentic interest in the conversation. So don't just sit here acting like you're bored, even if it's a really boring topic. Actually visibly look interested and maybe even impressed with what the other person is saying. It'll just help make the conversation go by a lot smoother. And then it's important to set expectations in the beginning of how the conversation will go. So setting your intention, for example, you set your intention to have clarity, to have an open mind when going into the conversation, or even to learn something new about someone else. And it's important to kind of have that background before going into a conversation. Next, we have challenging styles within a conversation. So I actually did a video about this on YouTube if you guys want to go check it out. You can also find it on the Transform page under the Cultivate Relationship section. And we're just going to go over 3 of the most important challenging styles, or the most common that you may see. So first we have the silent one. So this type of personality, this individual is quiet, they're reserved, and they take a lot of time to process information. I kind of think of myself as this person because I like to absorb everything first before I say something. And some tips when kind of managing this type of personality is to engage them early in the conversation. So make sure that you say something like, oh, Lizzie, I would really love to hear your input about this topic. Like directly say that. You can also create space in the conversation by pausing and affirming that you are listening with a smile. So when you're talking to this type of person, literally whenever they open their mouths, you have to be genuinely interested and nod and say, like just visibly look interested, and that other person will be more comfortable in sharing whatever there is they want to share. And to use open questions. So those learning questions that we talked about. How did that make you feel? How did working on that project make you feel? Just simple stuff like that. And next we have complainers, victims, and drama queens. Now I'm sure some of you guys know someone or two people that have this type of personality in the conversation. And these people constantly find the bad in every situation, and they tend to see the potential worst case scenarios. So they're always very combative, and they're never really open to anyone else's suggestions, and they're kind of just not, they won't help make the conversation go forward, basically. And some tips when navigating with these challenging styles is to look beyond the negative. So even if someone is being super negative, just try and maintain your positive composure. It'll help so much. Another important suggestion is to validate their concerns. So if they're explaining and they're saying that something is super frustrating to them, you say, oh, wow, that does sound really frustrating. Why is that frustrating for you? Just try and really understand. And then the next tip is to redirect towards the future. So if someone is stuck on something and they're being super negative, like say we're working on a group project and they really don't like the slide that we just made, you could say something like, oh, I understand that this slide is not something that you would like to present to an audience, but I think we only have 5 minutes left, so it's probably best that we get to the rest of the slides and finish the presentation, and then we can go back and tweak it. And then the last challenging style in a conversation is the sniper. So this person, it's kind of like complainers, victims, and drama queens, but it's a little different. This person is always the first to shut down ideas, and they tend to be reactive and automatic. So say you're in a meeting with other people and you're trying to devise a new game, a new icebreaker that everyone can kind of be a part of to get everyone to build rapport. And you're coming up with ideas and there's someone at the table that's always like, no, I don't like that. And then you offer another idea. No, I don't like that. Then you offer another one. No, I don't like that. And this kind of gets frustrating because if you're saying no, you should at least offer how to make it better or what you would like to see. Like you can't just say no. You have to be purposeful with your no and kind of explain yourself why you're saying no, and then offer a solution. That would be helpful. But anyways, some tips to navigating this type of style is, again, to pause, prompt, and paraphrase. These 3 Ps will definitely become super helpful in this type of style. And you can also dive more into their concerns. So you can say, why did you say no? Or I see you nodding your head no. What makes you say no? Or what about this are you not in agreement with? And then you could also use discovery questions. So these questions, like I said prior, they help you redirect towards positive future focused thinking. So next, another tip that the authors stated, which I found really helpful, was how to communicate in a virtual setting. So especially right now, since we've been online for basically over a year, this is super helpful in communicating either on the phone or via your next Zoom call. So an important tip is to reconsider multitasking. So this could mean when you're in a conversation and you think that you can send an email while you're actually talking to someone, it's best to just focus on the person head on. Reconsider using the mute button, especially if you're in a group setting. Like I know whenever I have my team meetings with Steve and the rest of the Transform team, he always says, all right, guys, take yourselves off mute. This is an open conversation, so everyone has the chance to contribute. So it's so that you don't appear reserved, and just so that, you know, he wants to make sure that everyone has a chance to contribute to the conversation and that no one is left behind. It's important to demonstrate to them that you have listened. So paraphrasing would be a great tactic to use here, and to say what they can't see. So an example of this, which I really liked that the book gave, was if someone just finished giving their presentation, or if someone just shared what their final project entails, you can say something like, oh, I know you can't see it right now, but we're all giving you a high five. And just something like that, super positive and encouraging that could make the other person feel better or just kind of give a positive air to the conversation. So next we have communicating in a group setting. So some tips are before the meeting, convene with the right people. So you want to make sure that whenever you're meeting in a group that you have people that are going to work well together and collaborate in an efficient and successful way. You want to make sure that you're going to head in the same direction with the conversation. So everyone that you're conversating with has the same intention with the conversation. They have the same goal after the conversation. And you want to make sure that you begin and end on time. Nothing's worse than saying that a conversation is going to be 30 minutes and having it last an hour and a half. So just make sure that you stick to your time frames. And during the meeting, it's important to build rapport. So like I was saying before, nodding your head, greeting someone is a great form of building rapport. Creating a direction in the conversation. So actually having a sense of what you're going to say beforehand instead of just winging it, because people can catch on to that very fast and they're going to lose focus. And ensuring that everyone's contributions are heard. So even when you have people in a group who are silent, like that challenging style we just talked about, you want to make sure that you say, "Hey, Lizzie, what do you think about this?" Or, "I see you nodding your head in agreement. What about this do you agree with?" Just making sure that everyone has a chance to speak and that no one is left behind. And then next, you want to confirm the next steps. So if you had a goal with the meeting, so say the goal was to go over the team charter that you just made for your new business, you want to make sure that people know what the steps are afterwards. So say I'm gonna send an email to you guys afterwards, kind of summarizing everything that went on in the meeting, and then we're gonna meet next week to discuss A, B, and C. And then these are outcomes that you'd want for yourself and for the other person in a conversation. So some outcomes you would want for yourself are to plan ahead and begin well by greeting, to invite others' perspectives. So make sure everyone's contributions are heard, even the negative ones. To listen. It's important for yourself too to listen and not jump into a conversation automatically. Make sure you're absorbing everything and really understanding where the other people are coming from. And remembering that a conversation is a two-way exchange of dialogue. It's not just one person leading the conversation. It has to be both people equally contributing. And then some outcomes for the other person. You want them to feel positive about the conversation. You wouldn't want someone to leave the conversation in a negative way or to leave the conversation kind of wondering, that didn't really go well. You want to make sure for the other person that you ensured that their opinions mattered, so that you gave them an equal chance to speak just like everyone else. You want to make sure that you unpacked their backstory, that you got to what matters to them in the conversation. And you want to make sure that you seek a deeper understanding or you want to make sure that they sought a deeper understanding in the conversation. So like I said before, a conversation is a two-way exchange of information. And if you got to your backstory in the conversation and the other person didn't, then that's a sign that maybe the conversation wasn't super successful for the both of you. And these are just some closing thoughts. So as a general, always remember to pause, prompt, and paraphrase in a conversation. Remember to have authentic interest, be genuinely interested in what the other person has to say. It's important to be flexible in a conversation. Not every conversation is going to go the way that you want it to. So it's just important to keep that in mind and to kind of go with the flow in that sense. It's also important to hold an intention in the conversation. So to gain clarity, to be open-minded, holding intentions can really go a long way. And lastly, it's important to get to the backstory. So to get to what matters to you and to get to what matters to them. And that is all. Thank you.